Hello guys, what's up? This is Morteza. Welcome to the next episode of my Solid Principles series at a Coder's Journey. I hope you're doing great and I hope you have watched the introduction, video. We kind of talked about what we are going to do during this series. As I told you, we're going to spend most of our time here in Visual Studio and that's why I haven't prepared any slides for this course. And I've already created a solution in Visual Studio 2022 and the first project, single responsibility principle. This is the first principle we're going to talk about. And I haven't, written any code here. I've just created this node file, node.txt, and I have, put in some text. We're going to talk about this so that you can, theoretically understand what this SRP or single responsibility principle stands for. And then we will move on to the code. We will implement this principle in code and we'll talk about the, nitty-gritty details of this principle. Now, I think if you just take a look at the, name of this principle, you can understand what it means. Single responsibility principle, right? So this means that probably your classes, your methods, and so on should have only one responsibility, right? So let's read and let's talk about these sentences one by one. So it says SRP or single responsibility principle states that there should never be more than one reason for a class to change. So what that means? This means that every class or similar structure, like for example, a struct or a method, right? In your code should have only one job to do. So this is very important for your methods, for your classes. Only assign one responsibility to each one of them. So if you have, for example, a method that is doing more than one thing, this is of course against the SRP, against the single responsibility principle. In my clean code in C# series, I have talked about this. When you want to, for example, choose a name for a method, if you can't choose a good name, or if you in your name you need to add words like, for example, and. This means that, for example, class or that method has more than one responsibility, right? So, for example, if you've got a method named, I don't know, like print and save the customer. So print and save the customer. So this method is doing two jobs, right? So printing and saving. So this is a sign. This is, a sign that this method is not following the SRP, and you should, do some refactoring. So it is very important for your classes, structs, methods they should all have only one reason to change or one responsibility. Everything in the class should be related to the single purpose. So when you choose a single responsibility for a class, everything in that class, the properties, the methods, and so on and so forth, they should all be coupled with one another to achieve that single responsibility that you have chosen for that class, right? So it doesn't mean that your classes should only contain one method or property. So single responsibility principle doesn't mean that your classes should only have one method. No, your class should have, can have many methods, many, properties, many events, but all of these different code elements, are here in order to achieve that single responsibility for that class, right? So there may be many members as long as they are related to the single responsibility. They should be related. They should be, coupled with one another. Cohesion is very important, right? In my clean code in C# series, I have talked about code cohesion. It may be that when one reason to change occurs, multiple members of the class may need modification. It may also be that multiple classes will require updates. So this is again very important. You need to understand that single responsibility principle doesn't mean that a class can only have one method or can only have one property. You can have many methods, you can have many properties. When a change, occurs, multiple members, multiple methods or properties in that class may need to, be modified, or maybe sometimes even multiple classes may need updates, but the important thing is that all of these classes, all of these methods only have one single responsibility, right? Not more than that. Application of the SRP can change your code considerably. One key change is that the classes in your projects become smaller and cleaner. So this is very important. If you follow the SRP, your classes will become smaller and cleaner. And as I told you in my Clean Code in C# series, we prefer more classes and smaller classes. So for example, if you have one very big class in your project, it is better to break down that class into multiple smaller classes. It is better to have many smaller classes than to have one very big class. You know what? So this SRP, when you assign only one responsibility to a class, that class becomes, of course, smaller and cleaner. The number of classes present in a solution may increase accordingly, so it is important to organize them well using namespaces and project folders. So when you follow single responsibility principle, you, for example, break down a big class with lots of responsibilities into smaller classes with a single responsibility. So the number of your classes, the files, may inevitably increase. So it is very important to kind of organize them in namespaces and project folders. The creation of classes that are tightly focused on a single purpose leads to code that is simpler to understand and maintain. So that's kind of a given. So when you have a class with only one responsibility, it is easier to understand that single responsibility of that class, and of course, in order to be able to change that class slightly, and of course the maintainability of that class will also increase. A further benefit of having small cohesive classes is that the chances of a class containing bugs is lowered. So of course, when you have a well-focused classes with only one responsibility and all of the different codes in a class is combined and related to each other, that class is the chances are very low that that class will contain bugs. This reduces the need for changes so that the code is less fragile. So the code becomes less fragile. A code which is fragile needs to be changed frequently. So we've got two different types of code. We say a code is either fragile, for example, or rigid. A rigid code means that making changes in that code is very difficult. But fragile is a code that needs to be changed all of the time or frequently. So it means that, for example, when you make a small change in a part of a solution, a large number of classes need to be changed as well. So that code is fragile. But the SRP reduces the need for a change, so the code is less fragile. As the classes perform only one duty or one responsibility, multiple classes will work together to achieve larger tasks. So by following SRP, we will have smaller classes, well-focused classes with only one responsibility, and these classes will cooperate with one another to achieve one or multiple goals. Along with the other principles, this permits looser coupling. So your classes will be independent of one another, will become more independent or loosely coupled. So if you change a piece of code in one of your classes, chances of needing to make changes, subsequent changes in other classes will reduce. It can also make it easier to modify the overall software either by extending existing classes or introducing new interchangeable versions. So when you have well-focused classes with only one responsibility, of course, modifying that class becomes easier, and introducing new classes again becomes easier, and the overall structure and the architecture of your software will improve. So that was a brief introduction to SRP, single responsibility principle. And in the next video, we will implement a sample code, and we will talk about how to implement the SRP, single responsibility principle. And we will take a look at an example which violates the SRP principle, and then we will refactor the code so that we adjust the code in order to implement the SRP principle. Thank you so much. I know that this video was very theoretical, but I think it is very important to understand the fundamental idea behind the principles of solid, or like for example the SRP. That's why I have created these notes. We'll talk about each one of them very briefly, and then we will move on to the code, and we will implement these in code, and you will you will have the best of both worlds. You will both understand the fundamental of the idea of all of these principles, and also you will be able to see how to implement each one of them in C#. So guys, stay around. In the next video, we're gonna take a practical look at SRP. If you haven't subscribed to A Coder's Journey, please do share this video with a friend. If you've got anything to say, leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll see you around. Take care. Bye bye.